Wanted to welcome you all to the Dynamics GP Year-End Tips and Tricks webinar. Today, Jeff Smith will be presenting, and he has, his main focus today will review the year-end processes and checklists, as well as step through any windows in GP that would relate to that. Jeff is a solutions architect here at Socius and focuses on helping clients maximize return on their investment in Dynamics GP. And he has over 24 years of experience in the GP product line. So we've got our expert on the call today. I also wanted to mention we're going to hold all questions to the end of the webinar just for the sake of time. But if you do have questions or something like that and you can't stay on through the whole call, you can go ahead and use Jeff's email to email him questions. You can also type your questions in. We can also unmute you at the end to have you ask your questions live. However, if you don't have your audio pin typed in, we will not be able to unmute you, so just make sure that you have that typed into your phone if you want to speak. But with that, I'll go ahead and hand over to Jeff Smith.
Thank you, Dawn. So just to reiterate what Dawn had mentioned is that our agenda for today, we really just have a couple things that we want to focus on, but there is a lot of material. Our goal is to review the common year-end processes that exist within Dynamics GP and provide you with tips and tricks for preparing for year-end. The actual work that gets done inside of Dynamics GP is sometimes very simple, but there is strategy in regards to how you approach it, the timing for which you do it, and things that you need to prepare to get ready for it. So what we're going to do is review year-end checklists and provide an overview, and we'll actually step through some applicable windows in Dynamics GP so that you can see where this work gets done. I do have just up front a couple very important recommendations in regards to the year-end process. So my first is use your resources. I can't emphasize this enough. If you have questions in regards to the year-end processes, there are all kinds of places you can go to get information about them. First place I would recommend is CustomerSource. So CustomerSource is Microsoft's, for those of you who don't know, is Microsoft's website for Dynamics GP users. They can go and there's a knowledge base and focus groups and things like that that can be very helpful. And all of these year-end checklists that we're going to go through today are available on CustomerSource. Also, if you run into any questions, you can also use Microsoft Dynamics GP Solution Support. They will be glad to help as well, and they gear up for the year-end process to make sure that they can help with this as well, because it is a very important time. And also, certainly want to offer up Socius as a resource for you as well. We have a help desk. We call it Client Care, and they're available. You can drop an email to clientcare@socius1.com, and they will be glad to help you with any questions that you may have in regards to year-end processing. My second recommendation is just make sure that you're prepared. Make sure that all of your day-to-day activities that lead up to the year-end are completed before you jump into the process. And we're going to talk a lot about that today, so you'll know more specifically the activities that I'm talking about. Also, be methodical. Make sure that you take your time, review and follow your year-end checklists, and double-check them if you need to. If there's questions, then go back to your CustomerSource or Socius and make sure that we've clarified anything before you move forward. It's always better not to guess. Also, many of you may have ISV, what we sometimes refer to as third-party applications that work with Dynamics GP, and we want to make sure that you're aware of the compatibility of those ISV products with the year-end process. And this will be the first of many times where I tell you to make backups. It is very important to make sure that you don't leave yourself in a vulnerable position and this is a way of doing it. Make sure that you have backups before and after you do your year-end processing. Some other resources that are available to you are what's called GPUG. Many of you may be members of GPUG, but it's the Dynamics GP user group. There you can see that GPUG has its own website that you can go to. There are other web-based areas where you can go to find information about these processes as well. You can see here is a few: gpwindow.com, mygpsearch.com, and you can do internet searches. There are blogs and videos and all kinds of resources that are available for you to help you through this process. Going back to CustomerSource one last time, one of the things that makes it easy to find these checklists is that every one of these checklists are assigned a knowledge base article number or ID, and you can see here in this list are those numbers. So inventory, for instance, if you do a search in knowledge base of 872713, you'll find the inventory control year-end checklist. Receivables management is 857444, and etc. So you can see that these articles will provide you with great resource. They're very thorough, and they talk about all of the things that we're going to talk about today. Some other things that you want to make sure, just general topics, is finalize any or all applicable transactions. Make sure that you've reconciled your submodules to the general ledger. Print any necessary reports and file. And this is the second time of many. Make a backup when you're finished. And then begin your closing process. So again, we will be making backups before and after the closing process to assure that you are not in any position of risk. In regards to what order do we close modules, this is the order that we're going to discuss them today. You'll notice that general ledger is last and always will be. But we will talk about sales order processing and purchase order processing for any of you that use those modules. We will talk about inventory control, receivables management, payables management, fixed asset management, payroll, analytical accounting, and general ledger. Now, one thing that as we go through this you're going to note is that there are modules on this list that actually don't have a year-end process within Dynamics GP. However, there are activities that you can complete in preparation for the other module year-end closing. And so I want to make sure that you think about those things as we go through this as well. The other thing that we're going to talk about is fiscal and calendar year-end close. Many of you, that may be one. For many of you, that may be one and the same. For some of you, you may be on a fiscal year, but there are certain activities that are handled on a calendar year basis as well. So we need to make sure that we differentiate those, and we are going to be talking about both fiscal and calendar year-end closing today. All right, so we're ready to start, and I'm going to remind you, you'll have this pounded in your head by the time we're done to make backups before and after you do this process. So what I'm going to start off with is the sales order processing and purchase order processing modules. This will be the first topic of discussion as we go through the year-end process. So sales order processing and purchase order processing really don't have a specific year-end close process. However, there are things that you should do in preparation for closing inventory and other modules down the road. And so in sales order processing, what we want to make sure you do is double check for any applicable invoices or returns and make sure that those get posted before you start your year-end processing. So we want to make sure that any invoices that need to be posted, they may have already been printed, but make sure they're posted before you begin your year-end process. And in purchase order, make sure that you double check for any applicable receivers or invoice matches and make sure that you post those. The receiving process creates an accrued purchases account transaction in your general ledger, so we want to make sure that you also in purchase order produce your received not invoiced report, and then you can reconcile your accrued purchases account to that report. So again, that report is the received not invoiced report out of purchase order processing, and you can get to that through reports, purchasing analysis, and received not invoiced. So keep in mind that is one report that you'll want to make sure that you pay some specific attention to as you reconcile back to your general ledger from the subledgers. All right, well, sales order processing and purchase order processing actually have a big effect on inventory. And so where we're going to go next is the inventory control module. Inventory, make sure you make your backup. The inventory module needs to be closed at the end of your fiscal year, whether that's on a calendar year or whether it's on some different fiscal year. So if you're on a July 1 fiscal year, then you should make sure that you close your year before you start entering July transactions into the system. Okay, because those transactions might affect inventory quantities that as they're posted. What the year-end process actually does in inventory is it transfers all the summarized current year quantity cost and sales amounts to last year for the items for which you're keeping summarized sales history. So there are views and there are inquiries that allow you to take a look at that information, and if it's important that timing is considered as you run this year-end process. It also updates each item's beginning quantity from the existing quantity on hand at each site. And it also zeroes the quantity sold fields in the item quantities maintenance window inside of inventory. And if you need to know how to get to that, you can go to inventory and then cards and then quantities and sites. And so that actually will track your quantity sold on a year-to-date basis. And so that's why it's really important to make sure that your timing is good so that you can close that back to zero so you start your new year with a clean slate and can track accurately the quantity of each item that you've sold during that year and can report upon that through the inventory module. All right, so there are some additional options that exist in inventory when you do the year-end close. And I'm actually, rather than looking at this screen, I'm actually going to show you real quickly a screenshot of that process. So in inventory, to get to the year-end closing process, you go into inventory and routines and year-end close. And this is a window that you'll actually find when you get to that year-end close option. So this window is a pretty simple window. And in reality, when you get to year-end, you just simply click the process button, and it will actually close your inventory year. It will do the things that I just described to you. But there are some options as you close your year. So in inventory, we actually have the ability to mark items as discontinued. And so the system actually has the ability to remove those discontinued items from inventory based upon some qualifiers. Those qualifiers are that there is a zero quantity of those items in your inventory. You do have the ability to mark an item as discontinued and still have some in stock as you cycle through items. The real purpose of a discontinued item is to indicate that I can no longer purchase that item. So it is possible that you could have items in stock but not be able to buy any more, in which case the inventory year-end closing process for any particular item that has quantity would not actually remove those items. Also, you have the ability to assign lot attributes. So if you're tracking lots within the inventory module, you actually have the ability to assign attributes to items, and this actually will remove the lot attributes for items that are sold. And then lastly, you have the ability to also remove sold receipts and cost change history prior to, and you can put in a particular cutoff date for that. So this does allow you to remove some information from your system. So you need to be sure that that's what you'd like to do. And as you can see here, those are options. None of those three items have to be marked. Also, you have the ability to have the system automatically update each item's standard cost if you are using the LIFO or FIFO periodic costing methods in inventory. This does not apply to average costing. It does not apply to LIFO and FIFO on a perpetual basis. So only if you're using standard cost methodology will this update. And it will take your most recent costs and make that the item's standard cost. So that is the process that will occur when you do your year-end processing in inventory. Okay, one of the reports that kind of ties into all of this information is called the Purchase Receipts Report, and so this removal of sold receipts does affect that report. So you just need to make sure that you're selecting that properly. So again, I'm going to move up a slide and just talk about, again, to reiterate, you wrap up your year-end, your year-end fiscal count, and related variance adjustment transactions posting. So if you do cycle counting, there is a cycle count schedule that can get set up, and you want to make sure that you do your final count before and appropriate adjustments prior to running this year-end process. So just like we talked about with purchase order and sales order and making sure that all the appropriate invoices were posted and purchase order receipts and invoice matches were posted so that you get the proper information when you do your year-end. And again, to run that year-end process, you simply go to Inventory, Routines, and Year-End Close. Couple things to keep in mind is the inventory batches. When you're posting those batches, make sure that you mark those to posted GL. Also, remember that you have options in regards to posting. So if you have multiple batches out there, you can use the master posting functionality, in which case you can actually post not only inventory, but all of the module transactions prior to running your year-end process. And then lastly, there are several important reports in inventory. The stock status report and the historical stock status report are two of those, and you can find those in Inventory Reports Activity. So a complete checklist for inventory control is to post all the transactions for the year, and obviously that's very important. The next step that we bring to the table is to reconcile inventory quantities, and there is a reconcile functionality inside of GP under Utilities. So you can go to Utilities and Purchasing, and there is a Reconcile Inventory Quantities option. When you run that process in GP, that tool will reconcile all items in inventory. The reason we mentioned the PSTL, and some of you may not be quite sure what PSTL stands for, but that's the Professional Service Tools Library. And what that allows us to do is actually just reconcile the items where there is a disconnect. In other words, where the summary does not equal the detail. So it allows us to reconcile just selected items versus the entire inventory if that's not necessary. We have the ability then to we would then complete our physical inventory count. Whatever method we use to do that, whether we make manual adjustments or use our stock count functionality in the inventory module, and then post all of the adjustments. Any other reports that you use within your organization to track your inventory and monitor it, you want to print those. You would then make a backup. You would close the year. Another option that you have is then to close the fiscal periods for the inventory series. That is not required, but it is certainly an option that is available. And at the end, I'll talk about closing fiscal periods for all the modules, because you'll see that actually is an option on each one of the modules' checklists. And then once you close the fiscal periods, then you make a final backup. So basically what you're seeing is you make a backup before and a backup after the process of closing the year. So the inventory process itself is pretty simple. The closing of the year is simply going to this window, Inventory Routines, Year-End Close, making the appropriate selections and what you would like the results to be in regards to discontinued items, sold receipts, etc., and then clicking the Process button to make that all happen. So that's inventory. And if you have questions, again, we'll handle those at the end, but certainly feel free to enter any questions that you have, and Don and I will field those as we get later on in this presentation. Okay. Next, what we'd like to talk about is receivables management. So receivables and payables act very much the same way, and so we're going to talk about these two modules are where it's really important to distinguish fiscal and calendar year. So again, if you are on an annual cycle that is anything other than the calendar, you actually have two different year-end processes that you will run. And so I'm going to talk about receivables first, and we'll talk about the things that you need to consider and do. Obviously, going into this process, we'll make a backup. I'm sure you're tired of hearing about backups already. So when we do the year-end closing process in receivables, it has similar functionality to what happens in the inventory module. We'll talk about that. But as an overview, you complete your monthly processing, including posting all non-recurring receivables batches. You print your aging reports and anything else that you do on a regular cycle. You also review your unapplied documents report, and you can get to that report specifically by going to Sales, Reports, Analysis, and Unapplied Documents. And then you run the Receivables Management Year-End Closing process. And to get to that, you simply go to Routine, Sales, and Year-End Close. And any new year transactions you save to batches for now. You don't post them. And so what we're going to talk about, and you'll see this in a minute, is the customer summary window is kind of a point of what you need to understand what goes on on the database side of Dynamics GP. And this is true on the vendor summary in Payables as well. So in receivables management, the calendar year-end close should be done at the end of the calendar year prior to posting any transactions into the next calendar year. That seems obvious, I'm sure. And we'll explain why that is the case here in just a moment. The fiscal year-end close should be done at the end of the fiscal year prior to posting any transactions in the next fiscal year. Again, a simple concept. And so with the calendar year-end close, the calendar year-end close clears the calendar year-to-date finance charges and moves them to the last year calendar field in the customer finance charge summary. So that's under cards and sales and summary and finance charges. So just to keep in mind, this only really applies and only really matters for those of you that assess finance charges for late payment by your customers. And so just keep that in mind. However, that year-end, those finance charges will not be cleared without the calendar year-end close process. The fiscal year-end close transfers all amounts other than the calendar year-end finance charges amounts to the last year column in the customer summary using the amount since last closed view. And I'm going to show you that right here. So if you go to sales and cards and summary, then this window will actually bring up your customer. It shows you a summary of their aging. It gives you a list of any unposted transactions. And down at the bottom, it actually shows you 3 columns, year-to-date, last year, and life-to-date. Obviously being GP life-to-date, so the data that you have in GP. The thing that's important to note is that you can show this summary view in 3 different fashions. You can show the amount since last close. You can show fiscal year and calendar year. The reason I mention this is that receivables management is partially date sensitive. And so, and what I mean by that is that there are certain things that will happen automatically, and it will recognize, and you have the ability to view fiscal year activity versus calendar year activity. But the timing of your year-end close, if you're late or if you're early, can skew the amount since last close. So you may say to yourself, well, so I just won't use that view. Well, the problem is that there are, and I'm sure many of you use Smart Lists, there are fields that are available to put in a Smart List that will be year-to-date sales, year-to-date invoices, etc., year-to-date cash receipts, and those numbers are all based on the amount since last close. So when we do our close, we want to make sure that we do our close at the proper time so that we don't include or disclude invoices that should show up in our year-to-date totals. So this screen is where the results of that will come, as well as your Smart List. When we actually do the year-end closing process, it's very simple. So you can go to Sales, Routines, and Year-end Close. And you'll notice here that the year-end close, you have options. You can either close both or all, which means that if I'm on a calendar year, I can close the fiscal and the calendar at the same time in one step. And so most of you that are on a calendar year, that's what you're going to do. When you come to this screen, you're going to notice that there is the last closing date, and what that should show you, if you've used GP for some time, is the last time that you closed your year, and that should be a year ago from when you're doing it now. And then you'll have the option on this screen as well to print a report, so that will give you the details behind the year-end closing process, and you simply click the Process button. If I'm on a fiscal year, then at the end of my fiscal year, I would select Fiscal and click Process. And when I run the calendar year and close, I would hit Calendar and Process. So as you determine whether you're on a calendar or a fiscal year, you'll either have 1 or 2 year-end close processes. And I just wanted to give you a quick snapshot of an example of a Smart List that I put together. And in this Smart List, you can see that I selected customers, and I added in the total sales year-to-date column into this report. That column in the left that is under the heading of total sales year-to-date, that number gets determined by when I close my year. And that's why we suggest that you make sure that you close your year at the proper time. Otherwise, there are invoices or cash receipts or things like that that could end up showing up in the totals on your smart list that don't actually correspond to what you'd like them to be. All right. So when we close the receivables module, we post all sales and receivables transactions for the year, and that includes any sales order processing invoices that appropriately were posted in sales order processing, because those will actually post right through receivables. You'll make a year-end, a pre-year-end closing backup. You'll close the year. You'll close the fiscal periods, and again, I'll actually show you that screen at the end of this presentation where you can close each individual module and each individual period. You'll also close the tax year and then make a post-year-end closing backup. So it's a simple set of steps. It's a simple screen to go to, and it really is about timing to make sure that you do it at the right time and that you're prepared with backups and the proper steps to do this. So, and just to go back, the article ID in the knowledge base on Microsoft's site is 857444. That's for receivables management. Okay. All right, so where we're going to go next is Payables Management. And again, we'll make a backup. And just at a high level, and the real complicating factor of payables is 1099s, and we just need to make sure that we talk about that process. And the other thing that I wanted to make mention to you, right now, Microsoft is supporting version GP 2010 and GP 2013. So there are some enhancements in GP 2013 that do not apply to 2010, and we will talk about those, and payables is affected by that. So we'll complete our monthly processes just like we did with the receivables module. We can run 1099s for tagged vendors, but I just want you to be clear that you don't have to run your 1099s right at the end of your calendar year. That is, you do have time during the month of January, as an example, to produce your 1099s. And payables management is date sensitive in regards to 1099s. Okay? And so then we'll go on to run the payables 1099 year-end closing process. In payables, the calendar year-end close routine should be run at the end of the calendar year prior to posting transactions in the next calendar year. The fiscal year-end close should be run at the end of the fiscal year prior to posting transactions in the next fiscal year. This sounds just like accounts receivable functionality, and it really is. It's the same concept. But the calendar year-end close in payables transfers the 1099 amounts from year-to-date column to the last year column in the amount since last close view in the vendor yearly summary window. And I'll show you that window. But I don't want this statement to scare you, because that doesn't mean that if I don't close my year right on time, that I'll get misinformation on my 1099s. And I'll talk about that in just a second. The fiscal year-end close process transfers all other amounts from the year-to-date column to the last year column in the amount since last closed view. And we'll look at that screen here in just a second. One of the things that I wanted to make sure, and I didn't mention this under receivables, but it applies to both receivables and payables, is if the amounts are incorrect in the amount since last closed view because I didn't close my year at the proper time, there are actually SQL scripts that can be run to correct the amounts, and all we have to do is request those scripts from Microsoft support team. So we do have ways, even if we miss time our closing process, we do have some steps we can go back and correct the issue. My only word of wisdom and caution to you is, why do we want to do those extra steps unless we have to? So try to be diligent in regards to your year-end close. Now, I know from a year-end closing perspective, receivables is a little bit more cut and dry, because when you post invoices and post cash, typically it's the day you receive them or the day you produce the invoice. Whereas there are times where you may receive an invoice after the beginning of a new month or a new year that you would like to post into the payables module for a prior period. So there are some things that you need to consider in regards to payables that maybe are a little less crucial around receivables. But anyway, keep that in mind. So if you remember in receivables, we had our screen that allowed us to look at amount since last close. We have that same view in payables under our vendor yearly summary, and you can get to that by going to purchasing, cards, summary, and yearly. And then you can see the summary view that says amount since last close. So when you close your year, ultimately what ends up happening is your year-to-date amounts will transfer over to your last year column, and your last year column will add up into the life-to-date column, so that you basically continue that process so that you can get a good view of the activity you've done this year and last year and overall with each individual vendor. And again, you have the ability to look at it in 3 different views: amount since last close, fiscal year, and calendar year. So the fiscal year and calendar year views actually will give you a very accurate, based on transaction dates, look at that information. And this should look familiar as well. The payables year-end closing process is very similar. You have the choice of doing closing all, just the fiscal year, or just the calendar year. So depending, again, on how your company is aligned in regards to its year, you'll make the decision of either doing all, or you'll do 2 closes where you close fiscal and you'll close calendar. You still have the option of printing a report to go along with it, and you still have view on this window to see the last time that you closed, which should be a year ago at the end of the prior year. Okay? And then all you really have to do, because this isn't really very complicated, is close year. The one thing I will tell you is that this process is actually a very quick process. It actually typically, unless you have a very significant amount of data, can be completed in minutes. I'm not referring to your general ledger close that way, but in regards to your payables and your receivables close, and even inventory, those windows are really simply updating some summary windows and moving data along, but they're not as time-consuming as what you would run into when you're doing a year-end close in your general ledger module, where the significant amount of data is actually moving from one table to another. So in payables, what we'll do is we will actually post all transactions for the year. We'll typically, and this is true in receivables as well, print the age trial balance with options report. You could also print a vendor period analysis report if that's one that you use. And I'm going to throw a curveball at you and tell you that we're going to install the payroll year-end update. And we'll list that as optional. But this year, it really is something that you want to consider. The payroll year-end update, and we're going to talk about this in more detail when we talk about payroll, actually is more like a service pack. So potentially, and I'll talk about this when we get to payroll, there could be changes to all of the modules that happen as part of that year-end update. And I'm going to talk about some that affect 1099s and payables that will happen this year. Okay? So after you install that payroll year-end update, and so you may install this update even if you don't have payroll, is what I'm telling you. So that's something you want to think about. You can make a backup that is named pre-1099 edits, and then you verify the 1099 information and edit it if it's required. So again, you're going to be able to, you don't have to print your 1099s right at the end of the month, right at the end of December, because the 1099 functionality is not date sensitive, and you will be able to pick the year that you'd like to print 1099s for. So once you print the 1099 statements, you can make a backup that's pre-year end. You can close the year. And again, this order can actually change because 1099s are date sensitive. You can then close the fiscal periods and the tax year, and then make a backup that is named post-year end. So you can see that the payables process and the receivables process are very similar, and depending on your year structure, you may run 1 or 2 closes during a 12-month period of time. All right, so now I had mentioned earlier that there may be some differences in GP 2013. So I wanted to make sure that you knew about the changes that were in GP 2013. So with the new release, there is some new functionality that allows us to have a little bit more flexibility. So for instance, if you've ever forgotten to designate a vendor as a 1099 vendor, and now you'd like to change them to a 1099 vendor, you have the ability to do that after the fact, after transactions are posted, and then you still have the ability to get accurate 1099s at the end of the year. So if you look at this window here, you'll notice that there is an Update 1099 Information window. You'll notice that there is a section where you can say, I want to update a vendor, I want to update 1099 transactions, or I want to do both. And I have the ability then to say, I want to take vendors that are non-1099, and I want to make them dividend or miscellaneous or interest 1099s. And I can even determine which 1099 box should be marked. And then I can go down to the bottom of the screen and pick which vendor I'd like to do that for. And it basically will allow us to either just change the vendor or change the vendor and their transactions as part of a utility function. Okay? So this actually can save you from having to do any kind of manual 1099s or just updating in a I guess a less structured way. And remember, this is actually GP 2013 only. So I had talked about going in and changing vendors, but here's where you also have the ability to edit 1099 transaction information. So this window allows us to bring up a vendor, get a list of their transactions, and then actually change the box or change the amount on any of their transactions. So this allows us to have flexibility in regards to if something was mismarked, either it wasn't designated as a 1099 or it was by mistake, you have the ability to fix it. And so this, again, is another piece of functionality that I think can be very, very helpful for us as we process the year-end and produce 1099s. Okay, so far we've talked about modules that we have to close, our inventory control, receivables management, and payables management. And you probably saw a lot of similarities between receivables and payables. They're kind of a mirror image of one another. The big keys in receivables are finance charges. In payables, it's 1099s. And you'll note, again, in payables, we have a lot of flexibility now with new functionality that will allow us to really make corrections to 1099 vendors and streamline the process of producing those 1099s. All right. So now what we're going to do is we're going to move on into fixed assets. And again, I want to remind you to make backups. Hopefully, this is instilled in your brain so that when you get to the year end, you're going to use this as well. So with fixed assets, some of the key things to keep in mind is close out the payables module before beginning. And also remember that the payables module actually can integrate to the fixed asset module. So you do have the ability to, as you receive invoices for assets, to have it create a placeholder card in your fixed asset module. So you want to make sure that you double check all transactions, all additions, all retirements, and that they're all posted before you actually begin your year-end process. You want to double check that the final or last depreciation routine and the related general ledger interface process are complete. Okay? And so then you want to run the fixed asset management year-end closing process, and that's under routines, fixed assets, and year-end. And really this is what it looks like, and this allows you to then close each of the individual books that you may have set up in the fixed asset module. So again, perform all the year-end closing procedures for payables management, enter all your fixed asset transactions for the current year, depreciate all your assets through the last day of the fiscal year, perform your GL posting, and as you probably, if you're using GP 2010 and before, the GL posting is a little bit of a different process than the rest of the modules. And then run any year-end reports that you want to keep as part of your year-end financial records. One new thing that's been added in GP 2013 that you'll be able to utilize moving forward is there is the ability to print historical fixed asset depreciation journals that you can then reconcile to the general ledger. So also you want to make sure that the fixed asset calendar is built correctly. Verify that the quarters are set up correctly for all fiscal years. Create a backup. Perform the fixed assets year-end closing routine. And after you, and I guess actually I'm missing a step here in regards to after you've done the year-end closing routine, create another backup. So you want to have on each of the modules have a pre and post backup. Okay, so that is the fixed assets module, and for fixed assets, the article is 865653 that you can go into the knowledge base and look that up, and that will provide you with a detailed checklist for closing your fixed asset module. All right. Now, the module that oftentimes is the most demanding at the end of a calendar year is payroll. And we actually had a separate session just on the payroll year-end close. I'm not sure if any of you sat in on that, and if so, I'm sorry if this is a little redundant, but for any of you that did not get to sit in on that session, we will cover the payroll year-end closing process as well. And there are a lot of things that are going on with this that you'll need to know about. And with payroll, obviously, there's always time for a backup. And with payroll, the year-end closing process is always done at 12/31, and you want to confirm the status of any new updates from Microsoft. And for those of you on payroll, I am going to talk about some dates that you need to know about in regards to the year-end update and then also tax updates for 2014. Okay, so we want to process our final payroll and our period and quarter procedures. We want to build the year-end wage file / table, and I'll talk about this in more detail as to what that means. And then we want to review and edit the W-2s and 1099-Rs. Now, keep in mind that we don't have to run our W-2s at the exact moment that we close our year, because the whole purpose of building the year-end wage file is to take the data from the current year and move it off somewhere so that it can be used to produce our W-2s, but it has to be done before you would run your first payroll in your new year. Also, we'll print our W-2s and 1099-Rs. We'll apply the new Dynamics GP tax tables, which we'll talk about. And the new calendar year payroll can then be processed. So just some of the screens that you're going to look at is, first of all, this is the payroll year-end closing window. And you get to that by going to payroll, routines, and year-end closing. And I haven't mentioned this before, but depending on how you use GP, you may go to tools and then routines and then payroll and year-end closing if you're using the menu across the top. If you're using the bar down the side, you'd go to payroll and then select your routines and then go to year-end closing. The system then asks you to create the year-end wage file. And this is the file that then takes all of the activity for each employee and summarizes it into a table that can be used to produce our W-2s. Once we've done that, then we can produce the year-end wage report. And we do that by going to payroll, routines, year-end wage report. And this will give you a basic summary of each employee. We then have the ability to go in and edit W-2s if appropriate. So you can see here that you can select the year, you can select an employee, and it will basically list wages, tips, other comp, federal tax, Social Security, etc. And this allows us to make any appropriate edits that we need to make. And then our next step is to actually print the W-2s. And you'll notice here that we actually have the ability to print normal year-end W-2s, or you can also produce pre-year-end for inactive employees. Okay? And there also, this is a This is a date, it is going to produce the W-2s for the year that you've selected. You can see that's the first thing that you define when you're producing this report. One of the things you'll notice is that you do have the ability to produce a validation report. You can produce an alignment form. You can produce then the W-2s. And you can also produce a W-3 transmittal form. One thing that I didn't really talk about in this slide deck that you also need to consider is filing your W-2s electronically. There is a federal magnetic media module. There's a federal magnetic, I can't speak, a federal magnetic media module that allows you to file with the government. And this then allows you to go directly to the federal government. There are also tools that allow you to file with state and local taxes as well, depending on your requirements. A company called Green Shades is a company we do a lot of work with. ADP also provides some of those types of services. And so there are options in regards to electronic filing for federal, state, local options. There we go. Also, we have the ability to produce 1099-R documents. As you probably know, the 1099-R basically is a form for the IRS for individual reports, his or her distributions from annuities, profit-sharing plans, retirement plans, IRAs, etc. And so that capability exists within Dynamics GP Payroll as well, and it works very much like the functionality of the W-2. So you have the ability to make any appropriate edits, and then you can print those forms as well. And you'll see that those kind of work the same way. You got the validation report, you got the alignment form, you got the form itself. We actually also have the ability to produce a 1096 transmittal form. And then here is just a shot of the W-2 electronic filing window that exists if you're using federal magnetic media. And this file is actually designated and prepared with the proper format to file with the federal government. So as we progress through the process with payroll, you need to verify that you've installed the latest 2013, as we close 2013, that you've installed the latest 2013 tax updates, that you've completed all pay runs for the current year, you've completed all month-end, period-end, or quarter-end procedures for the year, you make a backup of the original file, you install the year-end update, and I'm going to talk more about the year-end update in just a moment, but consider that year-end update a service pack that is typically designated as updates to payroll. It can be used for things like any changes to the to the W-2 form, or anything to get you prepared for the year-end in payroll. The year-end update will not include new tax updates for the following year. It is specifically to prepare you for the year-end. Then you'll create the year-end file, make a backup of that file, verify your W-2s and 1099 statements. That can happen, but again, you do not have to produce your W-2s or your 1099-Rs right at the point of the new year. You do have time to produce those. You'll notice also on this, you have the ability to create the W-2 electronic file if that's required. And another option you have is to archive inactive employee human resources information. So that is an option. It's not required. Setting up the fiscal periods for 2014 is another step. And then, as always, closing the periods for the payroll series for 2013. And then install the payroll tax update for 2014. So there's a lot to consider, and timing is really important in regards to the payroll year-end close. So a couple things to keep in mind here is with payroll, the supported versions are 2010 and 2013. So if you're still on version 10 or prior, there are not any year-end updates or tax updates for version 10 or 9 or anything before that. The year-end update is all-inclusive of prior updates for GP 2010 and 2013. Now, here's where you can actually download the update. And one of the things you'll notice on this slide is that once the update is installed, the version for GP 2010 will be 11.00.2292. And you can actually go in and look at that by going to the help windows off the main menu and then select About Dynamics GP. And it will actually show you the version, and it should say 11.00.2292 if you're on GP 2010. This service pack actually includes changes to project accounting, fixed asset management, human resources, payroll extensions, and advanced human resources. So there are several updates in the GP 2010 year-end update that affect modules other than payroll. Okay? If you're on version 2013, once you install that update, you're going to be on 12.00.1538. So that should be the number that you'll see after that update is installed. It includes changes to project accounting, fixed assets, manufacturing, human resources, field service, analytical accounting, payroll extensions, and advanced human resources. So I just wanted to mention a couple things that got updated with the year-end update. So in fixed assets, the luxury automobile maximum depreciation amounts have been updated. And there are tables that detail that out for the changes that will be appropriate. And then also the payables form and application changes. So the 2013 year-end update and 2014 tax updates are not available for version 10. I said that already. And the 2013 year-end update, so the year-end update for 2013 was released on November the 19th. And so it's already out there, and it's available for download, and there is no harm in loading it anytime prior to your year-end. And I would encourage you to actually go ahead and do that work, because you don't want to get down to the end of the year and be in a time crunch. So you can go ahead and load the year-end update, because it's been available since around the 19th of November. The tax updates will be available, latest I've heard, around the 20th of December. And you can get to the tax updates in Dynamics GP by going to Maintenance and U.S. Payroll Updates. And if there are updates out there, then they will be downloaded. Okay? So, two different things. The year-end update is a service pack that prepares you for year-end. The tax updates are there for your first pay run in 2014. So they are separate processes, and you want to make sure that you do them both. Sometimes the year-end update has more effect than others, depending on what changes have been made to forms and so forth. But this year, like I said, there are changes to the 1099 that are included in the year-end update. And so you want to make sure that if you're producing 1099s that you have that information. So in regards to the payables form, the 1099 dividend form, the street address box, and the city or town, province or state, country, and zip have been moved up a line as an example. The size of the recipient's box has been reduced. The size of the city or town, province or state, country, and zip or postal code has been increased to match the recipient's box. And the account number box and second TIN box have been switched with the blank box in the bottom of the form. So the dividend form has been changed. The 1099 miscellaneous form, there have been similar changes. The street address box and the city or town, province or state, country, and zip or postal code box have been moved up one line. The size of the recipient's box has been reduced to match the size of the and the size of the city or town, province, etc., have been increased to match the recipient's box. And then lastly, the 1099 interest form has been changed from 3 per page format to 2 per page. And also on the 1096, the boxes on the bottom of the form have been realigned. So you can see that this year-end update will actually be a multi-purpose update. So even if you're not using the payroll module, that there are some changes in payables, and most everybody that we work with uses payables in one form or another. So I want to make sure that you keep that in mind. Okay, there are no changes to the W-2 or W-3. There are some changes to the W-2 electronic filing, and I'll give you some information on that. So new fields have been added. So if you're filing electronically, the file will now include these fields of the employer contact name, the employer contact phone number, the employer contact phone extension, the fax number, the employer contact email and internet field, and the other EIN field is now applicable to all tax jurisdiction codes. So Dynamics GP currently supports electronic filing of the W-2 information in the federal EFW2 format, and the important piece here is some states also accept this format. So in some cases, the EFW2 format will be acceptable for state filing as well. That's something you'll need to double check. Electronic filing of the 1099-R form, state unemployment tax, or state W-2 forms in formats other than EFW2 are not supported. So that's payroll. Payroll is very comprehensive, and as you can see, the updates that are available for payroll are far-reaching beyond even payroll, and I just want to make sure that you're aware of that. I know that we did a Great Plains user group meeting, and there were some people that had some questions in regards to why in the world in payables do you have a reference to payroll, and hopefully you have a better idea of why we have that there now, because there are actually some updates that affect the payables module. All right, so it's time to move on to the analytical accounting module. And this is like sales order and purchase order. There really is no separate year-end close process for analytical accounting. However, balance brought forward entries are created for analytical accounting dimensions automatically as part of the year-end close process if you have the analytical accounting dimensions to set up to have a balance brought forward entry created. So I wanted to show you how you do that. So depending on what you're using analytical accounting for, you may want to carry balances forward. or you may want to treat it more like a P&L account and zero it out at the year end. So, so what you can see here is in the analytical accounting setup, and you get to this by going to your Dynamics GP, Tools, Setup, Company, Analytical Accounting, and Options. And the option that I'm most interested in for this is the option toward the bottom that says Include Dimensions in the Year-End Close. So that needs to be checked if that's something that you want to happen. And then also, the dimension has to be set up. So this is where you set up dimensions in analytical accounting. And under the year-end close section, you need to have a check mark that says Consolidate Balances during year-end close. So those are the settings that you need to make sure are in place if you want to carry balances forward in analytical accounting. I don't know how many of you in the audience actually use analytical accounting, but it is actually a very powerful tool, and it can be very good for tracking additional information on financial transactions without building them into your chart of accounts. So many people use it for such things as projects. They may use it for a variety of other things, tracking. We've seen real creative uses of it for many things, but project is a very common usage for it. Oops. All right. So as we keep winding along, the next option is the general ledger, and this one is backup is really important before you run your general ledger year-end close. So with the general ledger, it's always the last module to be closed. And unlike many of the other modules that we've talked about, it really doesn't need to be closed immediately. So you'll need to finalize any adjustments and post your single-use batches. Typically, you would print a detailed trial balance and any management reporter, or maybe some of you are still on FRX financial reports. Okay? And then you skip the period consolidation process. Okay, so also with the general ledger, you want to double check posting to history because when you close your year, you have an option of closing, or of after you've closed the year, to allowing individuals to post transactions such as audit adjustments, etc., into a closed year. If that's the case, then you need to go into your setup and you need to double check to make sure that all of that is aligned. But you can only post to the most recently closed fiscal year. Also, make sure that you check to maintain history and that you have a retained earnings account set up. And that retained earnings account can either be set up as a single account or as a divisional or departmental account. And that's something that you'll just need to decide whether you have one retained earnings account or several based upon your segmentation in your chart of accounts. One other thing that I actually don't have listed here that I think you want to do is you want to make sure that you always go into a smart list and print out your chart of accounts. That chart of accounts also includes whether each individual account is set up as a balance sheet or a profit and loss account. And if you happen to have mistakenly set up a balance sheet account as a profit and loss or a profit and loss as a balance sheet, then those accounts are going to react inappropriately as part of the year end. All balance sheet accounts do is at the year end is roll forward their balance at the end of the year to the beginning of the next year. All profit and loss accounts actually zero out to retained earnings. And so it will be important for you to double check and make sure that you have that set up. Okay? So when you run the year-end, the GL year-end process, there is routines, financial, year-end closing. all you have to do is click the Close Year button, but only do it once. We've had people that have accidentally thought the system wasn't doing anything, and they click it a second time, and that leads to problems. And so what I'm telling you is if you clicked it, don't click it again. Now, one thing has been added in GP 2013 that I'll show you in a moment that will probably keep you from doing that, but I want to make sure that you understand. So, and here you can see that I actually do mention before you close the year-end, the general ledger, create a simple account smart list with and review posting type, because that really does have an effect, whether it's balance sheet or profit and loss. And I do want to assure you that even if you miss one and it's set up wrong, there are actually ways, and there are some knowledge-based articles where you can actually fix it after the fact if you forgot to change one or missed one. Okay. Many people actually run a test close first in a test database. So you may duplicate your production company into a test, run the process so that you know how long it's going to take and what it's going to look like. And so you certainly should feel free to do that if that makes you feel more comfortable with this process. Also, with fiscal periods, you want to make sure that all, wow, I have an outdated slide here. You want to make sure that all of your 2010 module boxes are closed. That actually should be 2013. And create a new calendar for 2014. So this is the year-end closing window. So right here, what I'm referring to is your retained earnings account. In your setup, you have the ability to determine whether you're closing to a single retained earnings account or a divisional retained earnings account, in which case it will be based on a segment in your chart of accounts. The system will also allow you to define a starting journal entry number. You do have the ability to maintain inactive accounts. So if there are accounts out there that are inactive that you want to make sure stay in your chart, you can actually mark that and it will not remove them. The other thing I wanted to make sure you were aware of is if you look on this screen and you see the last closing date, the last closing date actually will indicate to you that there is a little bar below that, and that actually is a progress bar. And that may seem like a little thing, but that actually just got added in GP 2013 because oftentimes what would happen with the year-end close is it's chugging along, but it appears to not be doing anything, so people would get anxious and go to the point of even sometimes closing down their computer. When that happens, you're going to have to go back to and restore a backup because what's happening is in your year-end closing process is data is being moved from an open year table to a historical table, and there's a lot of data moving depending on how many transactions you run in a year. And so it can sometimes take a while versus when I was speaking earlier about payables or receivables, those are fairly quick processes. So now once you're on 2013, you'll actually have this progress bar, and it will give you a better indicator of where the year-end close process is and whether it's still actually running. If you're still on 2010, you won't have that luxury, or if you're on 10 or before, you won't have that luxury. So please be patient and make sure that you don't just shut down and assume that it's not running. That is a very, very important step. It'll cause you heartache if you have to restore and run through the process again. So the year-end closing process, in summary, is completing the posting procedures and closing procedures for all the other modules that we talked about. So we went down through sales order processing, purchase order processing, inventory, receivables, payables, fixed assets, analytical accounting, payroll, and make sure all of those are done. Post the final adjusting entries in the general ledger. Print an account list to verify the posting type of each account. Close the last period of the fiscal year. And then, optionally, you can perform file maintenance on the financial series of modules. Make sure that you verify the settings in the general ledger setup. So that's where we talk about posting to history, etc. Make a backup, print a final detailed trial balance, print your year-end financial statements, then you go in and set up your new fiscal year, and then you close the fiscal year. And you can close all fiscal periods for all the series. Also, adjust the budget figures for the new year, and then print the financial statements. So, as an example, when you're in Management Reporter or FRX, you may be focused on last year's budget. You move to a new year, you're in this year's budget. You may need to point to a new budget. And so just make sure that you do that, and then make a backup. Also, if you're closing in GP 2013, there are a couple new things. If any of you are using unit accounts, you actually have the ability to clear their balance during the year-end close. This is new. You didn't have that functionality before. Also, you can see in the year-end closing the maintaining of inactive accounts and the progress bar are new as well, and those are just highlighted with GP 2013. All right, so Don, I think that we've covered a considerable amount. I am willing to, and we have plenty of time, so we can field any questions that may have come from the discussion, and I would be glad to show additional windows and answer any questions.
Great. I have a couple questions in the queue here that I'll go ahead and ask you and let you answer those. So the first question is, we can install the 2013 year-end SP at any time before starting closing processes. Is that correct?
Could you ask the question one more time? I'm sorry, I missed part of it.
Sure. Yep, you're cutting out just a bit. It says, we can install the 2013 year-end SP at any time before starting the closing processes, correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
And I would recommend the sooner the better, just so you don't have time constraints at the end of the year.
Great. Okay. Next question. My company's physical year and calendar year are different. I have to close physical year. Do I have to close calendar year as well? If I do not close calendar year, what will happen?
If you're on a fiscal year and you don't close the calendar year in accounts payable, that really only affects your 1099 amount that shows up in your year-to-date column in your amount since last close view. And this is true in receivables as well, that it would be your finance charge year-to-date fields. It will not affect your 1099s because those are date sensitive. There are smart list year-to-date fields that use that amount since last close view, and those will actually will be inaccurate on those fields as well, like 1099 year-to-date amount and finance charge year-to-date amount. If those don't get closed, everything else and all the other modules except payroll work on a fiscal year anyway. So I think you should be fine on everything else. Payroll is calendar year only.
Okay. Next question. Let me see here. Now a bunch just rolled in. Does the GP year-end update for 2013 need to be run before the year-end closing is run?
It should be, yes, especially if you're using payroll or if you're producing 1099s, because there are updates that will be available that are, and those like W-2s and 1099s are all part of your year-end process. Now this year, there really are no W-2 updates this year, so that's not a concern. But because it's all one service pack, the 1099 update probably would, yes, we should install it.
Okay. And then we've got a few questions about if the slides are going to be available. We can send those out to everybody, can't we?
My understanding is that we will have a recording of this presentation, and I think we will also publish this this slide deck.
Okay, great. Okay, next question is, what does the remove unused segment, oops, I'm sorry, another one just popped in, so it moved. What does the remove unused segment numbers checkbox do on the year-end closing window?
That's a good question. Bear with me one second. Don, can you see my Dynamics GP now?
Yep, I sure can.
Okay, all right. That, I'm not positive. Now that I think about it, it must remove. I would be guessing. I should know that, but I am not positive. Let me. Do we have a name that I can actually send an answer out to that one?
Yes. Yep. I'll keep that one in the queue for you.
Okay. I apologize, but I'll make sure we get an answer for that.
Okay. No problem. Here we go. The payable module closed. Okay. So the payables module, when closed, moves the current year amount to previous year's bucket. We keep AP open an extra week, so we run a script to pull out 2014 transactions from the previous year's bucket. Mm-hmm. Would the AR module work the same way as far as current and previous year buckets go?
Yes. That script that they have for accounts for payables would also be available for receivables.
Great. I'm just reading through to see if we have any other new ones here.
Okay, while you're looking, Don, I'm going to go to one screen to make sure everybody can see this.
Sure.
So when we go into our setup and our company, and we have an area here that's called fiscal periods.
Okay.
This is the window that I've referred to. I hope everyone can see it. This is the area I had referred to in each of the individual modules. So optionally, at the end of each year, I have the ability to go in and close each period. And oftentimes our clients are actually closing it period by period. But before you, you have the ability to, as part of your year-end checklist, to go in and make sure these periods are all closed. But understand that if you want to go back later and actually close or enter a transaction to a closed year, that period has to be reopened. But this is the screen I was referring to during each of the individual module discussions. The other thing that I wanted to show is if we go into setup and financial and general ledger, this is where we actually define whether we allow posting to history. And this actually has the ability to be turned off. It has to be turned on to allow us to post to only the most recently closed year. So if there are audit adjustments, say for instance you want to be able to produce preliminary financial statements, and then you need to post an audit adjustment, you can close your year so that your balances move forward and your retained earnings gets updated by your P&L accounts. But then if that's marked, you actually then have the ability to go in and allow transactions to be posted to update the prior year, even though it's closed. So I just wanted to make sure everybody was comfortable with that idea.
Great. I have another question that came in. What if we have never closed any modules other than the GL and would like to start this year? What would the impact be?
Well, first of all, let me tell you, you're not alone. Whoever asked that question, you're not alone. And I don't want to overplay the importance of that particular function, except for the fact that if you ever wanted to produce a smart list that included year-to-date amounts, those numbers would not be correct because the year-end close zeroes out the year-to-date amounts. And so that really there's no bad effect. You just want to make sure you do it at the proper time. And then moving forward, you would be able, for instance, in payables, to keep track of year-to-date vendor activity. The one thing you'll need to know is that your last year data may be wrong, but in your amount since last close. But it will correct itself. We can run scripts to fix it anyway. So I don't think there's any downsides to doing that, you know, depending on which modules you use. And if we needed to talk more specifically about it before you do it, that would be fine too.
All right, I'm going to take one last look here. That looks like that should be it. Yeah, I don't see anything else that I haven't asked inside here. We'll just get back to everybody on where this will be published. More than likely, it'll be on the site with the recorded version of this segment. But we can go ahead and confirm and send links out as well.
Okay.
So, yeah. So
if there are any last-minute questions, I'm glad to answer them. Otherwise, we will we'll look forward to hearing from you as you get closer to the year end.
Great. Thanks, Jeff, for your time today and for everybody else for attending. We'll go ahead and just hang out here for a couple more minutes in case anybody has any additional questions. Oh, here we got a tip that somebody entered in on the line. It says, we require approval for posting payables batches toward year end, so 2014 batches don't get posted inadvertently.
Oh, that's a great idea.
Yeah, thanks for that, Don. Don Lapp presented that tip there.
Thank you, Don.
We do have a question on what is the best way to upgrade.
The best way to upgrade, I think, is what we do at Socius is we want to make sure that we have a good picture of what your system looks like. So we have an upgrade questionnaire that we have you fill out. That questionnaire tells us about your hardware scheme. It tells us about your you know, any custom reports you have, if you're using Management Reporter, how many reports you have, those kind of things. And that allows us to have a better idea of how long it's going to take. Also, what version you're coming from and going to. So that allows us to really kind of plan the upgrade a little bit better. Oftentimes, clients will do test upgrades. Test upgrades can be handy because it allows you to work through all the rough patches that may come up. Before we actually go into production, and that way we can also have all the reports that need updated, any integrations that needed updated. Those will all be done. So then we can, when we do the production upgrade, it actually is very smooth, and all we're doing is updating the GP data. So that's another option in regards to doing an upgrade. One recommendation clearly is to stay current with Microsoft. So as long as Microsoft is supporting GP 2010 and 2013, you should be on at least 2010, and try to keep a good eye on those support cycles so that you make sure that you're in line. When you get beyond that, then sometimes you can run into some risks that you may not want to take. But I would say, working with Socius, we try to make sure that we get you prepared and ready to go, and we can educate you on the process, and also make sure that we're aware of the entire environment so that we go into it. It's just like doing year-end, making sure you're prepared.
Awesome. Well, we don't have any further questions here. So we'll go ahead and shut down the webinar. Again, thanks everybody for coming. And let us know if you have any further questions, either directly to Jeff through his email address, or contact your account manager.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Have a great day. Bye-bye.